it, 'cause it was there. We're art sluts.
Hi, everybody. We have a treat today. My interview is with Ipek Eginli. She is a prominent voice in the experimental music community in Atlanta. That's how I met her. She was classically trained pianist born in Turkey, transplanted to New York, and we are happy to have her in Atlanta. She performs improvisational music globally and has released 2 albums of music. Here is part 1 of my interview with Ipek Eginli. You know, I've been just binge listening to your music, and yes, it's wonderful. I know you just begun recording, and I want to ask you about that. But I did want to say that, my exposure to you has been multiple times in live performances, which are just mind-blowing, extraordinary. Ipek Eginli is a visual, stormy performer. I want to start off and give you a taste of her live performance with a sample. Can you kind of talk about the different process you have as far as performing live and recording? Is it still partially improv, or is it compositional, or what's the difference between the two?
Really nice place to start, actually, Anne, because that process took a lot of thinking for me. As you said, that most of my music life is based on performing live, and I really enjoy that. There is a certain magic to it for me that I feel like a different part of me is enabled, and it comes out, and it feels new to me every time. And I love sharing music with people, and I'm just as mesmerized sometimes with the sounds that's being created, with the modular or acoustic sounds or the people I'm playing with. So it took a while for me to convince myself that, okay, you can make an album. First of all, I grew up thinking that I'm not the one to make an album. Like, it was just, I always felt like it was someone else. So when people started asking, so do you have an album? And I started having the seeds and this idea was like, should I? And first I needed to get through the idea of I'm not going to make an album just because people think that I should have one.
Right.
That was really important, because I started feeling this urge to, okay, people want an album because they will consider me a serious musician. Then I needed to say, okay, relax about that. You're not making an album until you really want to make an album.
And it's kind of like framing your work almost, it's like really cementing it. I wonder if coming from a classical background, that's why the concept of recording was not necessarily on your radar.
It wasn't in my radar, I think, in the way that thinking, as you know, that when I perform their long form, like I would just go play 40 minutes and then come back, if I'm allowed, if they give me that much time. And when there's an album, it's usually their tracks. So that was just the first practical part in my head. It was like, I don't see myself in tracks. So just very simple, but that was the first block, I think. And then the next one is the kind of perfection. Maybe that's where what you mentioned about the classical music background. It's that it had to be perfect. But what I'm used to when I improvise, it just disappears in the air every time I play, and I love that. It's gone. I met that music once. It was beautiful. I could listen to it. I could learn from it, but it's gone. So I needed to get around the idea of it doesn't, it's gonna stay there. It's not going to disappear. And then I started thinking how I should do it. And I started talking to people. Someone named Sarah Bell Reed, she's always been really helpful for me. I also worked on electronic music with her.
This is her mentor in electronic music, Sarah Bell Reed.
And on our conversations when it came out, why can't you include improvisation into your album making? Why can't that be a part of it? And then I started getting warmer to the idea. And then with my first solo album that came out 2024 June, which hasn't even been a year, I just closed myself for 2 days. And I played and played and played. I had created patches, my module patches, and I knew so it's improvised with some pre-decided elements. So there's this patch and there's this patch. There's this kind of preparation inside the piano, or this vocals and all of that. And then I would just, with that patch, with that setup, I would just record, 40 minutes an hour.
So it wasn't takes. It was you would do the long form and then kind of pull out the piece that you thought was most communicative of what you're trying to do. That's great.
And that made it still more natural for me. It made it flow in the way that was that felt more me. And then another beautiful realization was I thought editing was kind of like cheating. That it has to be natural. You recorded.
Miles Davis would disagree with you.
What would he say?
I mean, his recording process was all about he would record tons and tons of live, and then he would patch them together. He kind of created the mash approach to recording in his later work.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. So without knowing, that's basically what I did, and I fell in love with that editing, and I realized how much creativity you can have in that, how much artful decision making in it, and how much you learn, you grow, you start seeing things from a different perspective as a producer, because I also record my albums at my house. So not having someone else put the microphones and deal with that, and I produce it all. So basically I just had my hands in every part of the process, and it really was beautiful. And I loved the editing part and how that is a part of composing.
Yeah. Your most recent album, I've spent the last couple of days just really listening to that. Clouds Carry Me to the Sky Every Morning. Beautiful. And the concept I love, the continuity. Can you talk to me about, I know it's gotten some attention recently on the BBC, right?
Yes, that's so interesting that they just picked it up the next day after the single came out. So sometimes you don't really need to do anything. So sometimes just things happen. But then I don't do anything for those reasons, but it makes you happy when you get some recognition. There's this wonderful record label. They're kind of new. It's called Purplish. They're based in New York. Mikey from that label reached out and said that we would like to make an album, and it was wonderful. And then I started working on it, and it was different because first I didn't have a timeline with my first album. I could do it anytime. But with this one, I had a timeline, and I usually feels like I don't work well with that. But then, you can find space in you to make things work. So similar to the first approach that I had, I would improvise, but I had a little more decisions that I made beforehand for each track. So they were shorter. And what ended up happening, I was able to really hear things in my head before they were played this time.
Interesting.
And then I just played it, and I didn't play an hour this time. I played really 4 minutes to 6 minutes, and they all made it in the album.
Wow.
Everything I played in their real time. That they happened, because one of the things that's special for me is to have live electronics. So I put patches in a way that I can trigger things. So everything that's happening is happening simultaneously. All the electronics and all the acoustics as I play, whether I'm using a foot pedal, whether I'm using all software modular, or I'm all using hardware modular, or the piano is completely prepared. Everything was set up in the way that they would happen in real time. Mm-hmm. And then I would just play. And again, I did it in a way that I improvised all of those pieces, but I could hear in my head how they were going to go. And I just said, not an hour this time. So I would just go 4 minutes or 5 minutes or 3 or 2. I think there's one that's like as short as 2.5 minutes. And that was it.
Perfect. From the new album, Clouds Carry Me to the Sky Every Morning, here is Clouds Are Whatever You Make Them Out to Be. I find it interesting in instrumental music how people treat titles, because, sometimes for me, I record and then the title is inspired by that. Does that how it work for you? Or do you start with a concept and then use that as a jumping off point?
It's really interesting. They used to ask Debussy has preludes, and they're really beautiful. And he was an impressionistic composer. And he would have these scenes, and when you listen to it, whether it's water, whether it's fireworks or something, you could hear that in his music. But he always added the title at the very end. There could be really a lot of interpretations. He didn't want you to see what it was while you were playing it, maybe, or he was just, like you said, that he was creating the music and then thinking what it meant to him. So with my first album, it was exactly what you said. There was no concept at all created beforehand, and I would just play something, And then it would almost remembering a person, like what did Ipek was feeling and thinking when she played that, what she was hearing in her head. And then I met with what I thought as a listener, what I was hearing. So those two were just constantly talking. And then I came up with really disconnected names, and I really like it. They were almost little different ideas and pieces, and it was called a field recording in a black hole.
Yes.
And there were Turkish names, and there was this, my classical background. The first one says, what was it called? Remains of a Prelude and Fugue.
From her 2024 album, Field Recordings from a Black Hole, here is Remains of a Prelude in Fugue.
To me, it's like that one is so meaningful because I am literally that.
Right.
I played my whole life, I played preludes and fugues, and I am the remains of that, what was left and what grew out of that. So really meaningful names in the first one, but they're very disconnected. With the second one, I can't pinpoint really when the name and concept came out, but I think I was feeling I might easily get very obsessed with a thought, with an idea, and sometimes it's really difficult to just be in that headspace. So that was the first idea. It was just this really repetitive obsession, and I just imagined myself getting out of that. And then I remembered since I was a little kid, whenever I feel down or whenever something really affects me, I look up and I'm reminded that I'm surrounded with clouds most of the time. Sometimes there are no clouds, but even that just, I'm like, oh, okay, they're gonna come back. And I remember how small I am, how incredibly crazy that we have those things above us.
Right.
Like we think, oh, just clouds, and they're just so fascinating. They're gigantic, they're puffy, they have completely different shapes, they can be interpreted in so many different ways. It's art going on every day. There's a new exhibition that you look
They
up
transform in time.
every day. I mean, even like different times of the day, it kind of makes me forget everything. So, and I remember that idea of me being freed of my obsession and obsessions by just, what if I just went up? Like, what if, not only that I'm looking at them, but that I end up meeting with them. And then I started thinking, literally, not to just like, okay, let's create a story. It's like, what would happen if I literally go up? Then I thought, the time that you would be going up would be so intense that one of them would be carrying you up there. I mean, it's just, it was really fun. And then while you're being carried, what if you start touching them? Because like touch is a really beautiful sense. And then what if you look out and you start, just the idea of like, what if you're there and you have this day? What would you do? How would it feel like?
Let's listen to another from Ipek Eginli's album, Clouds Carry Me to the Sky Every Morning, called Hear My Heart Through the Acoustics of the Sky. What's your thoughts about melody? In my opinion, when I hear your music, it seems to almost reflect nature and sounds as opposed to formal melody. Is that intended, or is that just what you're feeling and how you express?
Oh, it's very, very interesting. Um, Despite of all my, it's a mystery to me too, to this day. And despite of all of my education, quite academic, all the way, I went all the way, that my approach to music is still very childlike and very and really in the way of experimental. And if a melody feels like it should continue, it does. Sometimes it's very short, and I play around with it, and I don't really think about it, if I honest about that. And there's this idea, but I'm influenced by so many things. Of course, my education is in there. My culture, I'm Turkish, so that's in there. Me being a woman is in there. It's just me being a mom is in there. So many of these things. My humor is in there. My darkness is in there. So there are all these decisions being made unconsciously, sometimes all coming together. So I can't just say, oh, just things happen. But being me for so long and being in music for so long, they kind of just happen a little naturally. But there's an idea that Wagner talks about. It's called endless melody. And in his and again, I have no association with necessarily his music, but I think of that sometimes because he treated the idea of release and tension, or tension and release, in a different way. What if you always have tension? So what's wrong with that? Or tension becomes not a tension, but it's just something continuous, because we feel like tension is like pain. It has to be released. And I remember even someone saying pain is just a sensation. It's not necessarily a negative thing, depending on the strength of that pain, of course. Just thinking of things that we think should last short, like pain should end, tension should end. What if you just get out of that idea? What if there's no length that you're even considering? So what would happen then? If you are able to point out and think of, what if I don't, but I'm thinking these things, that these are supposed to be this way. And starting to notice these little biases that we have. And then what if we don't? And then melody becomes just something yours.
Right.
Completely yours.
It's one of your tools. I find it really fascinating the way you perform with silence and you extend things out. Those pauses are so brave to me, because it's, at least for me, I like to have it going all the time, but there are times where you just let it be silent, and that's incredible.
I love it. It's so juicy. Exactly. It is. I even tell my students, like, when you're on stage, like, own it. That's your space. It's very important to not shorten that time. It's really important to not wait until it's over, not worry about being too much or too quiet for people who are listening. You're not serving anything. You are sharing space, and let them feel whatever they're feeling. Let them think whatever they're thinking. If they want to think of their dinner, that's great. If they want, I can't wait for it to be over. That's a beautiful variety of thoughts and things. It's just, we don't know where people are coming from, where they are in that day. But when you're, again, release yourself from all of those, you really show up more of you. And then it's not as scary to be silent.
Right.
For just a little bit, and just smile about it. This is so nice. It's beautiful. And we can't help but think of the idea that silence means there's no music, that the music didn't start yet,
Right.
and then silence means the music ended most of the time. And that's most of genres, actually.
Or even in art, the negative space.
Oh, you're
Yeah.
right. One, I just love. I love when I look at art. I do love playing the relationship between that negative space and what you choose to put anywhere else. But one thing that's different. I was just talking to a friend about it, actually. One of the things Beethoven does. Well, my friend was writing a lot of rests in his music, and we're thinking, this is great. Then who do you know who else does that? Beethoven. You look at Beethoven's piano music, there are just so many rests sometimes. They're like 16th rests and 8th rests, and you're like, do you really need that? But one of the things is his music is really gestural, and that's my gestures come in my playing as well. That something happens and it can just linger, and then it comes very quiet. And quiet, and then it's loud again, and there are always these silent moments in between, and it's so powerful.
So powerful.
Especially when you get a whole orchestra of, I don't know, 150 people to just be quiet all at once.
Right.
And that's written music, and I love written music. So, and you can't do that with 150 people, just be quiet all at once. But silence is so precious in music. Yeah. So
Ipek is also a professor of music and classically trained. Let's hear a classical performance of 5 bagatelles. That concludes part 1 of my interview with Ipek Eginli. Stay tuned for part 2 coming soon. If you're in Atlanta and are intrigued by hearing more experimental music, check out No Words ATL, Saturday, May 10th at Wild Heaven West Side.
Thanks for listening to Art Sluts Radio.
Hey, if you identify with the Art Sluts, explore our herstory at artsluts.net. That's ARTSLUTS.net. And purchase downloads of our music wherever you stream music.
All contributions and purchases will go to support Planned Parenthood.
Currently, 21 states have limited access to women's health care, including abortion, and 15 of those have a total ban.
Talking about your abortion experience, voting and donating to support abortion rights will make a difference.
I hate to leave you, baby. I don't wanna have to go now. It's just my music, baby, and I gotta do the show.
I think everything coming together a little bit. It's I always made my own improvisations and my music at home. I was a kid, I played by myself all the time. I just random games. I would act out whole stories. I would turn around a guitar and play act and take a stick, and for hours I would act like I'm playing the cello. There was this play and improvisation in my whole life. And really, I have a sister. She's 8 years older than I am, but both of my parents were working. They're lawyers, and I was by myself all the time, and I just played and played and played, and just made up stuff all the time. And but I almost felt how had this two personalities, that it was just very strict to do the classical music, do this and love that, and then there's you only do what they're telling you, and every to the little smallest detail, and then just go home and be whatever you want to be, create whatever you want to create, and talk and laugh in any way that you want. So those two things were always going on in my life.
Oh, okay.
And but I didn't live that around other people. It was my, still to this day, like I like being by myself, just to be in those worlds that I create. But then, yeah, classical music turned into me doing a lot of contemporary classical, which is very close to, it feels like written experimental music is contemporary classical music. So sometimes people see my arms on the keys, they feel like, oh, that's big, or the newest thing. I mean, I did that while I was playing contemporary music, or inside the piano things and all of those, or different things with my voice. And then when I started bringing back, I think with time and age a little bit, not that I'm that old, but I was bringing back that, just combining that really playful me, with all the exposure that I had, the Turkish music, and the contemporary classical music, my classical technique that my playing, and all the things that I missed out in life and music, that are just kind of combined in a way that it feels like in the background someone was just like, let's put this here, let's put this thing right here, and then it just became this. I don't want to describe it as something concrete, but it almost felt like, well, hello. Someday it just opened the door and it was just all fully ready, with just
Right.
built with the experiences of my whole life, and then just like, and she said like, let's do it. And then then we just teamed up, and I started doing, so everything that I have done and I have been exposed, it just got into a person, and then now I'm that.
And when you came to Atlanta, did you right away start moving in that direction, or was it later?
I actually was involved in contemporary classical music for several years. I was in groups like, I think they're still around, Terminus Ensemble of Contemporary Ensemble and Chamber Cartel. And I started my doctorate in Athens in piano performance. So I was still very involved, but I was still keeping things back. The playful improviser was a little bit back at home. But those are the times that I was exposed to Morton Feldman, for example, really a musician that I love, which showed me silence, or or being like having just let one note ring and just listen to that, and all those things would just, it was so hard because I could play fast and I needed to show that. And so I learned a lot when I first moved to Atlanta, completely a new place. And
What year was that when you moved to Atlanta?
2010. And I was in New York for, I think, 5-6 years for master's degree and a bunch of teaching, and also playing for a percussion department with contemporary music. gigs, but yeah, I was here for 5 years. It was just my doctorate in Athens and playing contemporary music in Atlanta, and doing things by myself, just creating a lot by myself, but not having it out in public.
It's so nice to talk to you and talk to another musician. And I love how generous you are with your process and the concepts of music. I think that's rare, that typically musicians, not to generalize, but especially instrumental musicians, they want it to be about the experience. Again, like you said, the audience, how they experience it is their experience. But yet I love that you are able to verbalize and almost express a philosophy of music, on your Instagram page and just in general. That's rare, I believe, to be able to explain the experience of music and performing. And
It's
I don't. That's not really a
no, I
question, but
love, thank you,
it's
and I
interesting.
just and when you give when you share your feedback, it's so sincere to me. It's also you are very generous with your feedback for me, and I love it. Incredibly meaningful for me. Not that I am doing my like sharing my expressions or my performances to get confirmation from people, but I don't always hear the best comments either, as far as
Really,
because when you're out there sharing things that people are not going to be always understand, that doesn't mean that sometimes they have a hard time to put me in a place. They can't understand, like, what are you exactly? What do you do? Yeah, I hear that I recently heard someone said that it's really hard to understand your aesthetics, and I just went, that's great, thank you. And it's because then I mean, it, don't get me wrong, that kind of affects me, and then I say, I ask, like, why did I try to ask, like, why I try not to ask why did I hear that. I try to ask why did that affect me. So I think those
right?
two questions are so
Right.
so so important. The difference
Yeah.
between, and yeah, it is very, because if people see things in boxes, and like, this is how music should be, and if and I'm not going to fit in there most of
You
the
mean
time.
non
Oh no,
musicians?
everyone, not just every. I
Everyone.
mean,
Okay.
because we can have bias in everywhere, and especially musicians, actually, or music critics, or people think people who think they know music. They might see things like, this is how it needs to be, and I've done it so long, I know it needs to be that, and I really can't see you in that box. So why is that? And then, see, I'm not going to fit in any boxes. I don't fit in my own box. I surprise myself all the time.
So my experience of the Atlanta experimental music scene is relatively new, but I think it's growing. I think it's important to spotlight. Obviously, I think that's important. But how long have you been kind of out and involved? Longer than I have recently, but how long has that been going on? This, Kebby and you and iDrum and all this
I
kind of
mean,
stuff
iDrum has always
that you
been
know
in my,
of.
since I moved to Atlanta. iDrum has always been an incredible influence for me.
So
I've seen so
incredible.
many concerts there, start since 2010, even earlier when I visited Atlanta. I started playing I started during COVID, but I did have a severe response to. I'm one of the long COVID people, so I had to
Really?
take completely 9 months out of my life. But I was in bed for 9 months, and I had to be with
Oh
the
my
family
gosh.
and all of that. So I had to take a complete break to everything, that I didn't know if I would ever be able to do it. But then when I was able to find the right doctors who could understand what would be happening to a female in certain situations, then it was easier for me to find the regimen. But that also, it just kind of pushed me out and just say, Ipek, this is the time. You got to do it. So I wake up every day. I don't know if I'm going to be ever sick again. That it's today's the day. So sometimes when
Right.
people see my drive in a way that I do this, it's just, to me, I know the loss of it. I know not being able to do that. I know not being able to move a finger for a while, and then to me everything is I'm grateful that I could talk to you. Every moment is grateful for me.
Yes. Every moment is so special. You know, I love that Bill Taff always says when we're at a concert, he says, "That's the stuff," and it just explains
Everything.
everything. It's